I can still remember every part of my childhood home. Some people think I'm crazy, but I remember even moments in this very small house on 1162 Pebble Brook. I remember my phone number, 436-3637, when there were only 7 digits. I remember a Yellow Pages, okay? I remember rotary phones. I remember the smell of breakfast in the morning. I remember waking up, looking through a slit in the door where light would wake me up, and I would see my mother and father eating breakfast together. And it was a good time. I remember the trees I played underneath. I remember the water hose back when we drank out of water hoses because it was safe and it was awesome, and that's why we didn't get COVID. So we had this water hose, and Mother would tell us what part of the yard we could play in to make muddy, and then we'd have to go to another part of the yard. I remember that. I remember catching grass snakes, maybe because our parents didn't love us, but they let us kind of pull grass away from the house, and snakes would hide there, and we'd collect snakes. A lot of fun, very dangerous. I remember my mother making popcorn, the bad kind, with oil and butter and loads of salt that would eventually give my father a heart attack. They loved each other, but that was kind of what happened back in the early 70s, late 60s. And we had movie night because we didn't have cable TV, and we had ABC Night at the Movies. That's all we had. And I remember the 3 channels in Dallas-Fort Worth. We had Channel 5, NBC. We had 8, ABC. CBS was not yet to be found. It would become Channel 11 and then 4 later. And then we had Sesame Street on PBS. I was the remote control in my home. We had to literally get up, and my dad would come home, and my sister actually asked me the other day, did our dad ever wear jeans? I'm not sure. I think he just wore dress pants all the time. It really was like one of those old sitcoms. And if you watch the idea of, WandaVision, that was the home that many of us grew up in. It's like you came home with the tie you took your tie off, and you had 2 pair of dress shoes, and there you were. But when it's time to change the channel, David, get up. You have to go, and you have to change the channel on this huge TV. Now, the problem was, sometimes you didn't get the right channel. So even if it was during a lightning storm, we had these things on outside of our house called an antenna, which was huge. It basically was a human lightning rod, and your dad would go, hey, go outside and turn it, and I'll yell at you when we get the signal. Again, our parents didn't love us. We didn't even have car seats. Can I tell you what our car seat was? There it was. Mom's hand. We didn't have real leather because we were lower middle class, but we had this weird plasticky thing, and that was our seatbelt because I was chubby little Dave, and so if Mom had to stop, her hand came out, and my butt would just like squeeze the seat, and you're like, there you go. I loved growing up. And Christmas took forever. I want you to think about this. Again, 3 channels, but they started doing something, okay? Here's what they would do out there in the world. It's like Rudolph Christmas special about to happen, okay? And it happened right after Thanksgiving. And you watched the parade, you ate turkey, that was cool. But when Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, began to be shown, it's just a matter of days before the big man in the red suit showed up. And you would wait, and you would wait, and you would wait, and that day would come, and you'd have your presents. And then here comes December 26th. You had to wait a whole year. Life was so slow. But I can still remember, guys, the smell of that popcorn, the way that my mother would cook chicken fried steak, the way the eggs would be cooked in that home. But when you're at that age and you have older siblings, see, there was something that began to happen. My sister went to elementary school, and strange and magical things happened in elementary school. And I could hardly wait. One of those things was she actually brought home homework. I know you think I'm mentally ill, but homework was cool. Because on these books, okay, you had to actually have, you would decorate it, and you had these book covers because you actually had books that you would bring home. And I'm like, that's awesome. So elementary school, oh my word, it was awesome. It was great. I had my Big Chief notebook, my number 2 pencil. I brought all the boxes of Kleenex we had. We didn't have germ squirt back then. Again, we didn't love kids, but we brought Kleenex at least. Oh, it was so much fun. Now, again, being from a less than rich family, I coveted. I got to confess to you, I had problems with sin because I only had a box of 16 crayons, and crayons in elementary school was huge, but the rich kids that came from the other side of the tracks, they had like 24 and 48. They had flesh color crayons, and in the back, they had a sharpener. Oh, wrong. Hated those kids. But I found love. Got to tell you, her name was Tracy. It was 2nd grade. She was built like a board. And she was watching me because back in the day, again, I wish I was making this up. All you school teachers, it's too bad. Y'all got to take sensitivity training, but they would literally take whatever construction was happening on 35. And by the way, our parents let us walk to school through all of that, literally 2 miles, okay? Over the bridge, over 35, past Brahms to Central Elementary. I know the whole way. And they didn't care. You just woke up in the morning, get out. But recess was magical because whatever they were building on this highway in Dallas, they would take bits of it and literally drop it in the middle of your playground. Big concrete tunnels. And you just ran it through and you play King of the Mountain and nobody cares. Like, ah! And then we could swing. Do you remember the swings? Oh my word. It's like, okay, first of all, you're going to try to get yourself going so far. You're going to try to wrap that around. We actually tried to do that. And then when we were way up there, we'd like jump, and we would jump, and I thought I was flying, right? But little fat Dave's like, whoop, boom, there it was. But it was awesome. And where were the teachers, you ask? They're on the other side of the building smoking their cigarettes going, hey, y'all kids have fun. This is our break. Y'all have fun. Y'all kill each other. And if we had scratches, it wasn't like, oh, let's call your parents. There could be a lawsuit. It's like, rub some dirt on it. That was my world. Oh, I loved it. So Tracy saw me jump off of the wonderful, the swings, and she started chasing me. I know this is the first night of encounter, and I don't mean to push the sexuality thing, but 2nd grade, she chases me, and she tackles me. Honestly, gentlemen, I let her do it, okay? And I don't know if I can say this. I'm going to get fired. She jumps on top of me, straddles. She takes her finger, she kisses it, and places it on my lips. It's awesome. Never made the track team, I was too fat. Always picked last in kickball till they realized fat kids can kick the ball. That was awesome. Couldn't run, had a pinch runner every time. It didn't work out with Tracy, I did the whole circle yes or no, and it was no, she wanted to be my friend. But I noticed, I know, it gets better. So my sister goes to middle school. That's a different level of maturity there. I mean, she had instruments she got to bring home. There was, football games. And, people actually watched you. That was cool. And they had a band that played, and you ran through a crash sign. It was awesome, okay? And so when I went to middle school in 6th grade, that was pretty cool. Very overcrowded school. But I was a trombone player. And my sister, when I was in elementary school and preschool, my lips weren't the same size as my head, okay? So my sister was so mean. She'd go, hey, don't stick your head out the door while we're traveling down the road or you'll beat yourself to death. I mean, that was my sister. So when I laughed, I would do this. Well, I understood that my lips were really good for a trombone. You're looking at first chair, 6th grade. Yeah. And as we wore our white jeans and white shoes and maroon shirts, I was the president of the DeLay Middle School Band. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, Christmas was still slower than all get out. It was crazy, but you know, it was kind of funny the way it worked. I played football, so I enjoyed football. Then we had this weird holiday. You know, like 2 or 3 days was Thanksgiving, just enough to say, hey, we don't have to be in school. And you had basketball tournaments, and that was the deal. And so you started getting into seasons, but it was so slow. Finally, Christmas break would come, and you did nothing. There was nothing. At the time, there wasn't even Atari, okay? You just slept late. You watched the now 4 channels, because CBS and Channel 11, there you go. The cartoons only came on Saturday morning between 8 and 10:30, and after that, your parents, I swear, they just kicked you out of the house. You had nowhere to go, like, get out of the house. And they would lock the door, and you're like, what are we supposed to do? Just go out there. Just go outside. And in middle school, we would go everywhere. We would go blocks away, and we'd go blocks away down that way. And as long as the sun was up, we played in the sewers. It was awesome. We threw rocks at cars on 35. Awesome. We knocked on people's doors without rings and hid behind bushes. Awesome. We ate. Okay, we'll start from there. Awesome time. Awesome time. And we didn't have reminders on our phone, and we didn't have, you know, oh my word, my parents have just texted me, where are you, where are you? Literally, this was how my mother would get us home. She would step outside, David! David! And there's someone 5 houses down. I think they're down at the basketball court, Lena. Can you tell the O'Neills? Yeah. So my mom would yell, David, David. The O'Neill, he was a highway patrolman. He would step out from his driveway and he could see where we were playing basketball. David. We'd all stop. Yes, sir. Your mom wants you. What does she want? What do you want? And it would be like a weird game of telegraph. You gotta come home. So I would come home with my friends, and as long as the light was up, we could play in front of our street, in front of our house. And then the lights on the light pole on the street would come, we'd play there. And then when it was too late and it's time to come in, Mom would flick the lights and we'd walk in. Nobody was concerned about us being abducted. Maybe they should have been. Weird things happen down in those sewers. I remember my first concerts. I remember my first touchdown. I remember my first tackle. I remember my first road game. I remember my first award at school. And I remember my first true love. Her name was Alyssa. This is going to be really pressing the envelope. So she was a girl in our youth group, and she was awesome. And I kind of liked her, and her mother worked at our school. I do not suggest this, but again, we couldn't text, okay? And I wasn't going to get on the phone because my sisters, we had call waiting by that time. I don't want anybody to listen. So I wrote a note. I think you're awesome, yada, yada, yada. Will you go with me? Now, let me clarify in the 80s. We weren't going anywhere. I don't even know why we said, were you going with me? But that means girlfriend and boyfriend. So because I was insecure, I said circle yes, no, and I added maybe, okay? Don't judge. And I folded it up, man, this is gonna be awful, and I stapled it and I gave it to her mother, okay? Don't laugh. She gave it to her daughter. Now, Wednesday night of church when that happened, and you know this, you have somebody in your youth group that's the matchmaker, and for ours it was Shelly, and I walked into the Louisville youth group there at Garden Ridge, and Shelly's like, David, she said, yes, and I'm like going, then I panicked because now it's real. And here's what I mean about that. The only thing you could do at that time is you couldn't like, hey baby, an emoji and smiley face, kissy, nothing. We had to sit next to each other in youth groups. So it's like the weird, you start walking my way, I'll start walking yours, right? And so Shelly leads Alyssa down this side, and I come from the other side, and I'm just like, Hey. I didn't know what to do. But that Sunday I decided I did know what to do. I was going to hold hands. Now, how far is too far? I'm about to tell you, okay? Yeah. This right here is, hi, I'm in your youth group. I don't really like you, but we have to hold hands during a prayer. Okay, that's what most of us do. Every once in a while, and this is where in 8th grade, Alyssa and I were in our relationship, it was waffle time. Now, I know. I know. You're like, what's this? Is this an encounter? What's going on? This is weird. I feel strange. Okay, here what happened. During the Lord's Supper, she was sitting right next to me, and you don't do this because everybody sees, you got to think of the body and blood, but during the prayer, I went for it, and I'm just like, but I didn't do this, folks. I went waffle, and she did this thing with her thumb. She kind of, I wish we had we have a close-up right here. She would just kind of rub her thumb on top of mine. Almost paradise, walking on heaven's door. I mean, it was awesome. She broke up with me and just wanted to be friends. Okay, so that was over pretty fast. I know, right? High school's awesome because in high school, you finally got to drive. And seriously, it is just cool. Some of y'all are just waiting way too long to get your license, but I had a 79 Silverado pickup truck with a camper shell, and it was awesome. We had to actually manually roll the windows down. I had an 8-track with Alabama and Oak Ridge boys. It's all I ever wanted, and it was great. And driving back, and just like, hey, look at me, I'm driving my windows down. It was just so cool. Especially with Bobby Sue and Elvira playing. Y'all don't know. By that time, Def Leppard was awesome. Yeah. Van Halen with the original David Lee Roth. And a cappella just started. Yeah. It's also the place I had my first real kiss. Okay, so here goes. I feel like it's true confession. So I literally, just note to self if you've never done this, I met her at Encounter, and then I met her at church camp. Her name was Jenny, and she was from a youth group in Denton. And so anyway, I said, hey, do you want to go out sometime? First car date, everything. Went to a movie. My arm went to sleep because I didn't know what to do. I'm just like, how you doing? And I don't even remember what the movie was because I knew I'm gonna kiss her. And so afterwards we have to go to supper, and I took her to Taco Bueno. Not good. Not good if you're gonna kiss her. But thank the Lord for Big Red Gum. Okay, that's good. We're proud of that. And I remember reaching over, and if I could say so myself, because I practiced enough in the mirror, that it was an awesome kiss, and these trombone lips came really in use. And all I could see out of the corner of my eye, and I know you're not supposed to open your eye, but I kind of did a little bit, just go what's going on, because I started noticing dogs barking and lights turning on. I had my foot on the accelerator. That's the only time I ever just said, well, see you later, Jenny, and bye. I mean, I was so embarrassed. High school was pretty awesome. The first time that you have that girl that's your steady girlfriend, and she gets to wear your letter jacket and your high school ring. High school was the first time that I came to Encounter, and it's a place where I gave my life to the Lord. The stage was the first place I ever spoke. There's so many memories. Christmas started, I noticing, coming a little bit faster. Seasons were very fast, and then before I knew it, I was a senior, and I just kind of blinked my eyes. I remember as a freshman, it would never get here, but there it was, the last game, the last concert, walking across the stage on a Friday night. We literally got on a van and came to Encounter the next day. Then I came to Lubbock Christian. First, that's where you went if you're going to do youth ministry back in the day. And I remember the first time I was a counselor, and the weird thing is, when I was a counselor, there's a young man that I still visit with, who's a father today, that I still visit with him, that was in my first counselor group when I was a counselor. But college is strange. Let's talk about relationships, okay? Sophomore year was rough because literally out of the girls that I dated, all of them wanted to be friends, and I ended up singing the song, not joking, the song they walked down on when they married someone else. 3 of those people. I know. I should have said no. Hey, I know it didn't work out, but could you sing the song when I walked down the aisle? And I was a sucker. But then, one of my best friends, Mike Mazingo, he had a picture poster. Now, again, we don't have like what y'all have today. Look at my phone and all my memories and in my files and stuff, nothing like that. We literally had to waste film and put it on a card, piece of poster board and stick it on our walls. And I'm in his room and I'm walking by someday and I see his poster and there's this girl, an attractive blonde girl. And I'm like, who is this? And he goes, shut up, Fraze, that's my sister. 30 years later, I call her wife. Yeah. Woo! Look at Tom. She didn't want to be my friend, and I sang the song she walked down on. It's a great life. I still remember when I saw her at chorus retreat. I remember the look my brother-in-law gave me at that chorus retreat, and I'm like, I'm just saying, she's better in person. I remember the first time that I saw her, like after that summer, and I looked at her mother and said, I think I'm going to marry your daughter. She was cool, and again, brother's like, 30 years. I remember the shows that were on this stage, but I remember the first time, there's been moments, like when I was in 4th grade, but I remember the first time that something happened. I was student body president, and I was out here on the basketball court waiting for my friend Carl to finish up a game. We were going to lift, and I saw a guy fall down on the court. And they'd been playing for a long time, so I just thought, okay, he's just kind of rolling around. The action continued, but they came back, and he didn't get back up, and they panicked, and they're like, something's wrong. And he had passed out. So somebody yelled for the trainer, and I knew CPR, and the trainer looked at me and said, you do breaths, I'll do percussions, somebody call the ambulance. And that's the first time I ever put my mouth on somebody else's mouth to try to bring life back to them. And they died that night. I was all of maybe 20 years old, and I'm thinking, this is crazy. And being that close, not just going to a funeral of a loved one, but actually being in the proximity of death. I remember that night with my roommate Scott, I just threw up going, what in the world? I had after stress going, what just happened? And for the first time, that chair began to rock, and it was just crazy. But being 20, I thought, no big deal, and life went on. I graduated, I got a job. Lisa and I started our life together. I was 21, she was 19. We started our youth ministry years. Oh, it's great. It's been great these 30 years. But in the midst of these years, going from an apartment to a house, and we would flip houses and go from this house to this house. And then the first time that Lisa said, hey, Dave, I'm pregnant. And I remember being in the CDC. I was here taking a graduate class. I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And then just weeks later when she would call me and the heartbeat that was inside of her womb was gone. And the chair began to rock, holding my wife's hair as she had morning sickness, realizing there was no life inside of her. It was the first year of our marriage that my dad, who was the best man of my wedding, first year of our marriage, my dad passed away. Shortly after that, we had a sister-in-law get breast cancer. My son Braden was born. He was about 1 year old when it took a turn for the worst. I was at Abilene Christian teaching and getting some grades, and I came home and I had a note on the door of our apartment that said, I've gone to Fort Worth, and I got in the car and drove because our sister-in-law had passed away. And a few short years after that, when my daughter Shelby was born and she was just a baby and my son was young, Lisa's mom developed brain cancer, and we buried her. So in very short order, it was my wife and I, our family around us, and no extended relatives. And that chair was rocking, and early on in our marriage, we had to consider that chair, and it was frightening at times. But it's a reality. I remember of May 2nd of 1999, after being at the church across the street for 10 years. We're driving back from a retreat, one of the greatest retreats we've ever had. Some of you in this audience had siblings. Some of you in this audience, your parents actually were volunteers. And a fifth wheel trailer came over that line, and the trailer was drugged through my bus, killing 6 of my kids. Literally last week, I went to Pine Springs and I spoke, and the last thing that I do, and some of you at Monterey don't even know, but there's a place up by the pond there at Pine Springs, a name of all of the girls that were on that bus. And I can tell you, when I read the names, I know exactly where they were on the bus. I know exactly what it looked like. I know exactly what it smelled like. I remember the concussion feeling. I remember the smells of just disaster. And one of the other things that I do is I drive by, and I park on the side of the road like I did this last Wednesday. And I remember. Just in the quietness of 6 lives, 6 funerals in 2 days. And the chair was moving. 2020 has been rough on everyone. And I'm not so sure that Lisa and I's journey through 2020 that would stretch into 2021 may not be unique to a lot of people, because it was a rough time. But my 2020 began in this auditorium as LCU was having an event, and I put my phone in the car, and as soon as I went into this parking lot and I turned on my phone, it just one ring after another. And it was one of my best friend's moms who called and just said, "Jason is shot." And my wife looks at me, and I look at her, and he goes, "You have to go." And by the time I got to Snyder, I would receive calls that he was no longer with us. Jason spoke on this stage. Jason was on my ministry team. He was one of my students. He was a friend. And he took his life. I had to go the next weekend to speak in Washington, D.C., and I told my wife I don't want to go, and I told my friend Rick Atchett, I really don't want to go. I just want to rest for a while. And they're like, "You got to go." And I still remember going up to Washington, D.C., and meeting Josh Ross, that you're going to hear of on Tuesday, and we're just talking and spending time together, speaking on grief of all things. And I was in the airport, at Dulles Airport, and all of a sudden reports of COVID began to be announced. And shortly after that, everything began to shut down, as you know. Right after that, we realized that my son got COVID. It wasn't a very big case, and he did well. My daughter got it, but I still remember the day when my wife came home and said, "There's something on my breast that the doctor wants to look at." And then the call from my wife, "We got to go see the doctor." And we looked at the doctor, and the doctor said, "Lisa, you have breast cancer." And so in the middle of COVID, we had to figure out how to take care of that. So between that time, in the middle of COVID, trying to keep her safe, we go back and forth from Dallas. They have a huge surgery. And in that surgery, to do a double mastectomy and take lymph nodes out of her, to have to wake your wife up and say, "It's in your lymph nodes." But then to receive news that I think it's going to be fine. So in January, we have another surgery. But before that, in November, my mother turns. Now, my mother has had dementia for a long time and Alzheimer's. And I remember when she found out in her brain scans that she was not going to be remembering like today, but she's going to think about the past and the present, and everything would become real. She said, "David, what do we do?" And I said, "Mom, I'm going to remind you of who you are, even when you don't remember." So the last thing I did before taking my wife back to a follow-up appointment in Dallas, I gathered my family and said, the reason I'm not going to go be with my mother during this time is because my mom and dad raised me to love my wife first, and I have to go with her. And we prayed and we talked about my mom, and I had them put the phone next to my mom's ears, and I told her, Mother, you were a great mom, and I still remember things about you. Thank you. And I went through every aspect of my life, and I said, just thank you. And she mumbled something. She would be gone just days later. And the chair moved, and we buried her. And it really was a celebration. And about 5 weeks ago, my wife's belly became extended. And we had to go get another scan, and they said she has an 8-inch mass inside of her belly. And I was at work out at Friendship High School, and she called me and she said, we need to go talk because the doctor really thinks it's malignant. I didn't want to hear that. I haven't taken my wife to Europe yet. That's all I could tell her. And I drove somewhere out, and I just was driving and thinking about all of our life together, 30 years. I'm like, oh, my word, and just got it all out and prayed to God. I said, okay, here we go. My wife found a song, the song with the words that says it's going to be okay. And I got those words printed, and it's sitting on our wall at home, and I got a little poster made, and we took it to the hospital, and 3 weeks ago we had a surgery. This time I got to wake my wife up and say, it's not malignant. It's going to be okay. And it's awesome. But I'm exhausted. It's been a long 2020 and 2021. Would you agree? And all through it, it's that chair. It's this chair. Because I could say, and I have friends here that realize that in a lot of ways, I shouldn't be here. I mean, my life has scratched this chair so many times. The chair of forever, this eternity. What's going to happen when this world is over? And I have to ask questions, okay? What's it going to be like? When my dad passed away when I was 22 years old, God, why did you do this? When children unborn can't be born, you're like, why is this happening? When my kids struggle, when my wife struggles, when you bury kids when a friend dies. This is an encounter that's real. I want you to consider what James said. Listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Why, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. I hope you have plans for your life. I do. I have a lot of stuff that I love to do and a lot of things that I have to accomplish. But something has happened over all of these years of my life. And this chair rattling every once in a while, I know that there is a time and place when I will be gone and no one will mention my name. And really I could say at my age, that's fine. I don't really need the approval. I need the hope and assurance of what happens when I sit in this chair, right? And it doesn't come easy. I know 6 kids who had dreams that I won't see them again until all of this is over. I dream of seeing my friend Jason. I dream of seeing my mother and father again and my in-laws. I dream of all of those things. And it will be a reality because of the hope that I've placed in Jesus right now. But I will guarantee you, I do not leave my house if there's problems if I got to get on an airplane. I do not leave my house if I have problems with my kids. I do not leave my house if I've spoken an unkind word to my wife, because I know life is a vapor. And it is so real when I think back to preschool. It is so real when I consider Central Elementary and Tracy. It is so real, that note that I sent to Alyssa. It is so real, the first kiss. It is so real what happened when I was a freshman. It was so real the first time I told my wife we had a job. But it's a vapor. And for many of you, you were like going, this old man is rambling about a lot of stuff that I don't care about it. But in my world, and in the world of some of my friends, they could recall like it was yesterday. Your life is a vapor. So why am I talking about this tonight? Because this is why you're at High School Encounter. It's not a middle school camp. It is a high school camp where you encounter God, where the realities and the hurts and the pains and the successes and all of your wants and wishes and God collide right here, and you have to make a decision. What are you going to do? 38 years ago, I made that decision at this camp, and it's made all the difference in the world. I want you to do something before we close. You're going to think it's one of these weird youth ministry things that I try to get you all emotional, but it actually comes from the patristic fathers years ago, people who wrote right after the apostles. And one guy in particular, the guy's name's Augustine. You probably heard about him. He wrote a thing called Augustine's Confessions, and he talked about how do you make a decision? How do you encounter the decision you have to make right now in 2021? How do you make the right decision? And he said, you go to the last moment of your life. So would you just do me a solid and just close your eyes for a moment? Not wanting to be just like fanciful and over emotional, but I want you to be at your own funeral. I want you to be laying down in your casket. The songs have been sung, the words from the preacher have been spoken, and now the preacher has walked at the head of that casket. The casket is open, and people will walk in front and look at you. I hope they're sad. I think they will be, and I think it's sad of this is a life well lived. But I want you to pay attention. As your friends walk by your casket, what are they saying? Well, that person was a good football player. They were great at band. They were great at soccer. They were great at theater. They're talking about you being the life of the party. Are there tears of regret? Or are there just tears of normal sadness? What are your friends saying to you? The next group that comes by are your teachers, youth minister. Those who are closest to you as far as adults, and they walk by. What are they saying to you about you? What are they whispering to each other? Then your cousins, aunts, uncles. What are they saying? And that as the preacher has everyone in the auditorium leave, it's your family, your mom and your dad, brothers and sisters. What are they saying? Everybody open your eyes. When James talks about life as a vapor, here's how he ends James 4. If any one of you knows the good they ought to do it and doesn't do it, it's sin for them. leading you through that exercise, there was probably some reality, just like the confession said. If you go to your last moment of life and work yourself forward, let me just ask you some questions. Is there anything that you are bringing here to encounter that you need to place before God, and there needs to be a divine collision? Is it a relationship? Is it a job? Is it some extracurricular activity that you are so into that you're totally sacrificing all of your spiritual life to buy that idol? Is it your insecurity? Maybe it is family trauma or pain. I want to encourage you. Bring it all. Bring it all and give it to God. Bring it all. For our life is a vapor that appears for just a little while, and then it's over. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, if the Lord gives Lisa and I many more years, or if tomorrow it's over, we're okay. How? Because I know whom I believe. He's been faithful all of my life, and he will be faithful when I breathe my last. That's what I want to give to my kids. That's what I want to give to you, is the assurance that even though life is a vapor, oh my word, we can live an abundant life because we're not afraid if everything is over tomorrow, because we know that death is just the beginning. Amen? So if you know the good you ought to do and you don't do it, it becomes sin. So what do you have to encounter this week? Maybe it's your personal salvation. Maybe it's some other more dilemma you're in. Maybe it's just a question. Have an encounter, and let's deal with the eternal.